¿sí? Es el fundador de Rootstock, que es Diego Gutiérrez Zaldívar, creador de una de las principales L2 del ecosistema, histórica, con muchísima trayectoria.
La primera
entonces
L2
la primera,
en el mundo.
perdón, gracias. Y esta es la primera conferencia, la conferencia más antigua del mundo también. Por eso somos compañeros. Y una persona muy crítica, históricamente muy crítica a las L2, pero que mañana particularmente va a estar dando una charla sobre L2 Covenant, o sea, Covenant para L2 y yo no sé cuánto. No soy un técnico, que es Peter Todd. Peter Todd, please, come on stage. Jullian Duran, ¿estás acá?
Hola, hola.
¿Estás acá? Bueno, como no está Jullian, tomamos esta charla. Creo que hay más que valor suficiente en este grupo. Perdón.
El moderador, el mejor moderador del mundo.
No solo tengo a Peter, o sea, para mí el Ágora es el mejor escenario. Está el main stage y está el Ágora. ¿Tá? Entonces mi corazón está en el Ágora. Sépanlo el año que viene también. Mi corazón está en el Ágora. Y lo que tenemos ahora, las tres personas que vamos a tener acá ahora, porque yo me voy a bajar, ¿sí? Para mí son tres top players del espacio, ¿sí? Así que la persona que me faltaba introducir es a nada más ni nada menos que a Lunaticoin, ¿sí? Uno de los principales podcasters, en realidad.
Sí, difusor y promotor de Bitcoin.
Y profunda.
Educador.
¿No? Educador, uno de los mejores moderadores que puede tener el espacio. Y tenerlo a Luna también acá en este espacio para mí es importantísimo. We are turning into English now. Yes, because you say, yeah, okay, Pero, yes, so please sit down. And Luna, this is yours, and you have to deal with these two big players in the space. Okay?
This is my mic.
So
okay.
Evenly spaced out.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Espero que estéis bien. Nada, ahora vamos a pasar al inglés, pero os quería saludar y es un placer estar en Argentina. So, now English, because I believe no Spanish here, right, Peter?
Not that I'll admit to.
Okay.
Un poquito.
You can't talk shit behind my back in Spanish. I might know it, but I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. Okay, we're going to be talking about L2s, and this is what you probably didn't understand, but Rodo was explaining that lately in many conferences there is tons of projects that are Bitcoin L2s. At some point I found a website, it's long ago, maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, about Bitcoin L2s, and I said, what the fuck? And I started scrolling. It was like a never-ending amount. And I was like, I thought it was like Lightning, sidechains, end of it, no? So, what the heck is starting to be an L2 now?
Well, so I was paid by Fulgur Ventures to do a big paper reviewing the covenant-dependent L2s that try to go scale Bitcoin further than Lightning. And I realized pretty quickly that I needed to actually start the paper with a definition of what the fuck is an L2. Because there's so many projects out there that just didn't feel like they should be L2s. I mean, I had people calling like Liquid an L2. And, you know, with all due respect to Blockstream, Liquid is a very fancy bank. So the definition I came up with is an L2, specifically a Bitcoin L2, is a system for transacting Bitcoin in a way more efficient than one transaction per transaction, where either you have unilateral withdraw, so like if I am involved in the L2 with you, I can get my money back, or economic disincentive to fraud. So, and this is not the preferred way of doing it, but sometimes you have to, where like if I have some money together with you, you should not be able to profit from stealing it. I might not necessarily get all my money back, but you should be able to make money by stealing it. And yeah, the vast majority of L2s on whatever website you're looking at, I can guarantee you they did not meet that definition.
Yeah, and I would say, because I've been studying the L2 concept for a while now. No, we started with the Rootstock idea at the end of 2014, so it's 10 years now. And I think if you look at all the L2s, what they do is they anchor the latest state of the secondary network on the Bitcoin blockchain somehow. No, it's like they use Bitcoin blockchain as a way to anchor the state or register the latest state of the network. That's what all L2s have in common. But when you talk about the sidechain, you have the concept that Peter was mentioning, that also that secondary network has Bitcoin as the native currency, no? And that only a few have. It's like I would say Liquid and Rootstock. I don't know, maybe some of the new ones do. But then you have a third element that is like, is that network with every transaction, with every operation contributing to the Bitcoin network, to the infrastructure, the security infrastructure? And in that case, Rootstock is the only one currently. Others might do in the future if they incorporate merge mining as well. But one thing that is very important is like, if you have a second layer that is only anchoring their state in Bitcoin, but they have another token as the main, and every transaction is incentivized in that token, that secondary network becomes, because of game theory, it becomes a threat to Bitcoin. So they are kind of a parasite of Bitcoin, not a true contributor to Bitcoin, because basically they are operating with another asset, they are incentivizing their ecosystem with another asset. If they were to do merge mining, they would incentivize some of them, the Bitcoin miners, with another asset, so they start competing with Bitcoin itself. So not all L2s are the same creature. It's like L2 is such a vague and open, term that, you are seeing secondary networks actually being remoras and extracting value from Bitcoin. Some others that are contributing to the Bitcoin economy but not to the Bitcoin network, and some that are contributing both to the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin economy. And for me, that differentiation is key, because the Bitcoin L2 as a phenomenon is so new. We are starting to learn about these different concepts, no? But that's relevant for what we are discussing.
Then I want to jump into trying to send a message to the people to understand what they can check to see if they are in something legit or in something that is fishy as fuck. But I wouldn't jump into this yet. Wait, Peter. I want to ask you first, like, why are we seeing then all this wave? If not all of them are L2s, why there is such a trend now of calling yourself an L2? The last one I heard before coming here was Cardano. Charles Hoskinson saying, yeah, we're coming to Bitcoin. Cardano will be a Bitcoin L2. And I was like, what the fuck? So why do they do this? Is it because they are dying?
I mean, I would say first and foremost, people want to call themselves an L2 because the biggest, best known example of an L2, Lightning, works. I mean, I've been to plenty of conferences where every time you go buy a coffee, buy a bottle of booze, whatever, I mean, every single purchase you make is with Lightning. You've got an entire country, El Salvador, where if you're going to go and buy something with Bitcoin, more likely than not, you're going to use Lightning to go do it. I mean, Lightning just works, and it's a really great brand. But because it's a really great brand, obviously people whose projects are failing, they would love to go hitch onto that idea, even though their projects have absolutely nothing to do with Lightning. And I would even make the point, I mean, I wouldn't call merge mining an L2. Merge mining doesn't use that kind of security model. It uses the L1 security model. And, maybe that's good, maybe it's bad, but it's just not relevant to L2s like Lightning. L2s like Lightning aren't even necessarily about anchoring any state. They tend to be much more about creating a piece of game theory where, like, we collectively could make transactions. You could do some transactions, I could do some transactions, but then we use game theory and economics to say, well, only the right ones should be the ones we do. And, obviously that's a very simplified explanation, but that gets to the core of what Lightning is about. If we have a Lightning channel, we get ourselves into a position where doing the right thing is what makes us the most money. And that has nothing to do with, like, anchoring stuff to Bitcoin. That's just passing around signed data that happens to be transactions.
Diego, You can answer the two things. My question or the comment on merge mining is not an L2.
Well, I think, the thing is, there's no such thing as a definition for an L2. Again, I think Peter was giving one definition. I gave another one. You can say, okay, what is an L2? Is somebody anchoring the latest state? Is somebody, as Peter said, scaling or making, Bitcoin transactions? That's something we haven't answered or defined in stone. I think we have also another problem if we want to keep digging in that rabbit hole. That is what Peter is defining is off-chain protocols that are using a blockchain to anchor, basically to do dispute resolution or do settlement of balances. And that's Lightning. Also, the rollups are going that way. So for me, that's a way of saying L2s. It's like saying, okay, an L2 is anything that is an off-chain protocol that uses a blockchain or an L1, to settle or to do dispute resolution. And I've been thinking a lot about that because, Rootstock from that perspective is an L1 of an L1. It's an L1 square, because it's a blockchain, it's merge mined with the same, 60% of the Bitcoin miners are protecting Rootstock, so we have a share pool of security, and then we are anchoring the state on, or if you want settling what is the latest state of the network using Bitcoin for that, the Bitcoin blockchain for that. Nonetheless, I think the thing is that's another thing. I don't think we have a proper taxonomy yet to, sort this out. It's I think an L2 conceptually is not very well defined. You might say we have off-chain protocols running on Rootstock. You can say that's an L3 because then you have L2 as or you can say it's an L2 to the L1 that Rootstock is, and Rootstock is an L1 anchor on an L1. But we don't have that semantics yet very well defined. But I want to give something regarding the other thing that you were saying. It's is this shitty? Is this a scam? I think at the end, again, there's one thing around intellectual honesty. It's if you say, I'm a second layer or, to Bitcoin, I use Bitcoin to anchor the network state, but truly my economy is around a different token. I incentivize everybody with a different token. So truly my usage of Bitcoin is very narrow, it's very limited, and I'm not contributing to the Bitcoin economy. And you are truthful about that. And you say, well, this is my take on an L2. That's okay. The problem of many L2s is they were presenting themselves, and I think the Cardano situation is exactly that. It's as if they were part and a contributing part to the Bitcoin economy and the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that's where, I draw the line. You can be very valuable. You can do whatever model you want. Don't try to conflate, one thing with the other. It's if you're not contributing to the Bitcoin economy, to the Bitcoin and to the Bitcoin infrastructure, for me, okay, you are a remora chain. It's and that's okay. It's not a problem. But just say what you are. Don't try to disguise what you are for another thing.
Question, Diego. At which point did you at Rootstock start calling yourselves a layer 2? Was from the beginning?
Well, actually, we never call ourselves an L2. It's we are part of the L2 movement, if you want, but we always call ourselves a sidechain because that's actually the definition that Blockstream defined at the end of 2014, and we went, after that model. So, but again, it's the differentiation between the technical term, which I think is what Peter is trying to define, a more technical concept behind an L2. And then there is the market, the marketing terms, or how the industry, or not even the industry, the investors are looking to the ecosystem and trying to capture new movements within this ecosystem. And so, I mean, we say, okay, you can think of Bitcoin, of a Rootstock as an L2 if you like, because that helps understand the general context. but technically maybe the definition of
Yeah.
Peter is more
I'm going to go to
accurate.
Peter now about this definition, because how I feel is that we start calling layer 2 or using the layer 2 concept because of Lightning. And because of Lightning, we were using this term as not only built on Bitcoin, but basically being Bitcoin itself in such a close way that, of course, you're adding some risk when using Lightning. It's not exactly the same as Bitcoin, but it's very close. In the past, I had a podcast with Sergio Lerner, and I said, okay, if all these coins are the solar system, and Bitcoin is the sun, the closest to is like the security of the sun, like maybe Lightning is Mercury or Venus, it's so close. And I asked him like, what is rootstock? And he told me, no, it's maybe Mars or Jupiter. So there is some risks added. So we're getting away. But I'm saying this because it feels that with Lightning, we were very demanding to be as close as Bitcoin as possible. And now the term is much more flexible.
So this is one reason why I like to use a definition of L2 that actually has some requirements. Because if you don't start putting some definitions and start putting some requirements on it, you get into absurdities where you would go say, like, liquid is an L2. And if liquid is an L2, well, why isn't Kraken an L2? You know, why isn't, like, Bitfinex an L2? Right? Why aren't all these exchanges L2s? Because they all have their own internal ledger books. You know, they all can do internal transactions. And if the definition of an L2 is that broad, well, it starts becoming kind of anything. So if you start nailing it down and having some requirements, you know, you get something more useful that means something more in marketing. And the weird thing about Lightning is, depending on the circumstances, it's not necessarily weaker than Bitcoin. You know, there are circumstances where, like, if Bitcoin has a hiccup temporarily, Lightning can be the more secure option because of how the incentives work. Similarly, you get weird circumstances where, like, liquid can be more secure than Bitcoin if Bitcoin has technical failure. So it's not, I wouldn't call it like the planet analogy of one is closer to the other. I'd say they're just different things with different types of trade-offs. You know, it's like trying to go and say, like, is glass stronger than plastic? Well, what are you putting up against? I mean, do you have a match? If I have a match, a lot of plastic can get melted pretty quickly with fire. On the other hand, if I have a hammer, I can probably smash that glass better. You know, they do different things in different ways, and one is not clearly better than the other. And I'd say Lightning isn't clearly better than, you know, on-chain Bitcoin in that sense, but it can certainly do some things that on-chain Bitcoin isn't very good at, and other things it's not so good at.
Okay, so Peter, want to say something?
No, yeah, I mean, I'm totally with Peter on this. It's like, you know, it's different security assumptions. It's not necessary. It's very difficult. That's why I like when you know, you listen to Nick Szabo, or the times we talk with him. It's like, for him, it's never about trustless. There's no such a thing as trustless. It's like you have different assumptions and you have trust minimization. So you minimize the trust on third parties, on systems by different means. So you need to understand what are your trust assumptions, and then, you know, you, for a specific scenario, which is what Peter was saying, you know, one system might be at a certain point, you know, more secure than another one. But I wouldn't say, of course, if you have everybody, I know, a blockchain that is run by 3 people in their houses, okay, you know, that's not very trust minimized. It's like you are depending on those 3 people, like, running the servers properly and everything. So all the things we are doing is trying to minimize trust and make systems as resilient as possible within what is, you know, the current state. It's like, for example, having a trustless bridge between Bitcoin and Rootstock was not possible. That's what we created, the pegnatories, the federation, because Bitcoin cannot understand a transaction from Rootstock in order to release funds based on that, on a secondary network, no? So you try to do, what we did is, like, we created a hardware module, so the pegnatories didn't have access to the private key, so we created the more trust minimized environment you could have for a federated peg, no? But that's it. It's like, and when things evolve, and now we have BitBMX coming, maybe with one pegnatory staying, and you can have economic incentives, and with one pegnatory staying honest or economically interested will be enough to keep the whole network safe. So instead of having, you know, I don't know, in the past model 8 of 15 signatories, now with 1 of 15 is enough. So you reduce the trust. You do trust minimization, and that's all what we have been doing since Bitcoin forward, no? Minimizing trust on third parties.
My conclusion, I don't know why, but they started to make me talk about layer 2s in many conferences. So I've been listening to many people, Fedimin people, Liquid people, and so on. And I'm starting to, I will ask you now, Peter, about if we can point what makes an L2 so that everybody can be checking that if we could number them, the things that you believe. But for me, it's starting to be like 2 categories. Built on Bitcoin, or built for Bitcoin economy, a very broad term, with a lot of different trust assumptions, different risk levels, and then an L2.
I mean, the big thing I'd say there is, like, it's worth saying, you know, there's such thing as a Bitcoin L2. Because there certainly could be such thing as an Ethereum L2 or a Litecoin L2 and so on and so forth. You know, I mean, earlier versions of the Lightning LND software used to support Litecoin. It's just no one used it, so they eventually just removed that. But certainly if you're talking about Bitcoin L2s, well, you're transacting Bitcoin. But, I mean, the way I would go answer it is the reality is there are not very many L2s out there. Realistically, there's Lightning, there is Arc, there's maybe some roll-up stuff, although it's not really clear if those really are L2s. That's kind of a complex technical question. And of course, none of them actually exist yet in a way on Bitcoin. And then of course, there's a whole bunch of like tweaks to Lightning, which are basically still Lightning. It all works roughly the same way. It's just modifying some technical details under the hood, which, you know, it's better in some ways, it's worse than others. But frankly, that's about it. I wouldn't, you know, Fedimint is not an L2. It's a trusted bank system. It's a very nice version of one with great privacy, but it is a trusted bank ultimately. You know, Cashew is still the same deal. It's a trusted bank with great privacy. And I mean, that's useful. I use it myself, but it is still what it is. It's just not an L2. And maybe in the future, someone will come up with some clever way to make Cashew a genuine L2 in some way, by adding ways to go and like force ways to get your money out of the bank if it fails and things like that. But until that happens, it's just not an L2. And that's just how it is. So, you know, I mean, the answer may be a little unsatisfying from a marketing perspective, but really, I think the simple answers are, yeah, tons and tons of protocols have just jumped on the L2 bandwagon because it's good marketing. You know, I personally have a protocol that sits on top of Bitcoin. It's the Open Timestamps protocol. It does timestamping. I certainly wouldn't call an L2. It's just a timestamping protocol. If you want to get technical, it kind of fits into the L1 definition because it uses on-chain Bitcoin transactions directly for security in a way whose security properties are the same as, you know, a Bitcoin wallet. But it is what it is. It's a timestamping system and happens to use L1.
Okay, so could we number the conditions that make an L2 an L2?
I mean, I think the definition I put in my paper is a pretty reasonable one. You know, it's a way of, you know, for a Bitcoin L2, it's a way of transacting Bitcoin with more than one transaction per on-chain transaction. So it operates, you know, a layer above rather than just doing on-chain transactions. And it has the technical features of either unilateral withdrawal, so you can get your money out when you're done, or the other guy can't profit. And once you have those specifications, you end up with something that has similar properties to Lightning. Because, you know, it's like, I mean, if you go say a door is something that can go open and you can close it and you can't walk through it, like, you've just defined a door. You know, there's a lot of different doors out there, but they're all roughly similar. They all have those kinds of similar features. You know, some may be a bit weaker than others, but you know, if you're going to be sane about it, like you at least got to have some threshold there. And I think once you define L2s that way on Bitcoin, it's no surprise that there aren't that many of them, because it's hard to come up with a new L2. You know, it's very difficult to come up with the kind of game theory to make something equivalent to Lightning. Lightning's pretty good. That's why so much L2 innovation has not been radically new L2s, it's just better ways of doing Lightning. And funny enough, Arc that I mentioned earlier, one of the main things people expect to use Arc for is to make Lightning channels in more efficient ways. And you know, this kind of how exactly that works is kind of beyond the scope of, I think, this. But it's just notable that it's the same kind of category, so sure enough they go fit together, because they're kind of roughly the same thing mathematically.
No, I think that's one definition of L2, not necessarily the definition of L2. That's a proposal. In my opinion, that's like, you know, one specific type of L2. Because at the end, if you want to think about L2s, the concept is like you are extending Bitcoin capabilities, no? Extending the ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem capabilities. Whether it's like adding new functionality that is not present on the layer 1, or extending, like what Peter said, no? I can do many transactions with only one settlement transaction on the layer 1. So, but not necessarily, I think, like giving the concept of L2 one specific use case or one application is not necessarily like something where we have, you know, agreement on the industry level. What I'm in favor of what Peter is saying is like, whatever it is, let's get to a definition that you can like do the checks and say, okay, this is an L2. And maybe you can say this is a payment scaling L2. This is a, you know, functionality scaling L2. This is a, or we can disregard secondary blockchains altogether because I don't know why, but we need to define that. It's like, okay, we don't want L2s to be other blockchains, merge mine blockchains. Okay, but we need to define why and how that's valuable for, you know, for the ecosystem to understand the function of each one of these components. Regardless of that, again, I think we should understand if a protocol, whether it's an L2 by Peter's definition or, you know, a sidechain like Rootstock, is really in alignment with Bitcoin as an economy and as a security infrastructure. No, it's like, are we contributing? Are we helping? Because even the ones that are open timestamp is contributing to the Bitcoin L1 network every time, very marginal, but it's contributing something. No, it's like, you know, you could say anybody that is paying fees.
It's so marginal.
It's
it's
very
effectively
marginal.
Zero.
Exactly.
I mean, the thing is, open timestamp scales so well the entire world's data.
I know. I use it.
Like,
I love it. But the point is like, you can say it's marginally, you know, contributing.
It might be negative in some scenarios.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say it's certainly good for Bitcoin.
Yeah, but my point is like, what I know is that nobody knows what an L2 is, and has been taken as a marketing concept more than what Peter is defining, like saying, you know, let's try to define this as a technical concept and say, okay, then we know what is an L2, what is not an L2. And in my opinion, what we'll have maybe is different types of L2s, more than one definition that is narrow to one use case. It's like saying, okay, this is a payment scaling L2. Lightning, you know, maybe a roll-up. So it's like it has a specific use case. But at the current point, it's just a marketing term, not a technical term, that's for sure.
I mean, I think the reason why you want a technical term that kind of makes some sense is really because marketing, you know, has ethics involved. Like when people go download a wallet that says it's an L2 system, you know, I would expect you to go get something roughly, coinciding with what you expect. In much the same way as that when you download a wallet and it says it accepts Bitcoin, it damn well better accept Bitcoin rather than like Bcash. You know, and you can go argue that maybe we don't have precise definitions of this, but I think from a customer's point of view, you know, from a person actually using it, like if they download something that says L2, it should work roughly like Lightning. If they download something that says it's a sidechain, well, if they call it a trusted federated sidechain, you know what you're getting. You're getting a thing with certain like trust model and a certain type of failure. In much the same way is that, you know, when you have a Visa or MasterCard, we have a pretty rough, reasonable rough idea of what kind of failures it can have and what sort of risks we're exposing ourselves to.
Yeah, that's going back to the security assumptions, no? And the trust assumptions. And I think that's the point. It's like, I don't think defining, like L2 is such a broad concept that I think defining trust assumptions or security assumptions on that term is too vague. I think it's like we should have like within L2's sub-definitions of different ways of extending Bitcoin.
But Diego, I have to tell you that you played some game before, because you said that you agreed with Peter that definitions are important, but then you said, but I don't like his definition.
Exactly.
But
I'm saying,
then,
I mean,
my
point is
constantly.
No, but my point is not like saying. What I'm saying is this is not settled. I mean, Peter is proposing something. We are in a process of like the VIPs in Bitcoin. It's like somebody proposed something. There's big discussions in the community. There's a moment where we reach consensus, and then we say, okay, maybe Peter's proposal end up being an L2, but this is not defined yet. We don't have consensus on the ecosystem, and then we have a lot of people that is using L2s just as a marketing stunt without the interest of expanding Bitcoin or extending Bitcoin.
But this is why it's important definitions, no? And I understand that you want to find a definition. It's only that you are not agreeing with Peter one. But as Peter was saying, I think that when you download a sidechain wallet, if you are long enough in the scene, you perfectly know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And there is no need of, but what kind of sidechain? Or what kind is a sidechain?
Yeah, sidechain has a good definition. But even in sidechains, we have merge mine sidechains and we have federated sidechains, because Liquid is a federated sidechain and Rootstock is a merge mine sidechain.
But
and
both
those
are
have
IOUs.
different.
But both are IOUs, so you are in both, one more IOU or less IOU, but at the end in both you know what you are getting.
No, that's the point. A merge mine sidechain has higher security than a federated sidechain.
That's a very debatable argument.
Well, I know, but I can say that. Let's say that because I don't think it's the question to be discussed now.
So I'd say I think you made a good point, is that the tokens you get on a sidechain, they're not directly convertible to Bitcoin the way that a Lightning payment is. When I have a Lightning wallet open with you, there really are Bitcoin that we co-own, and there is data on my computer that can turn that Bitcoin into an on-chain transaction that gets it to me. Similarly in ARC, if you're an ARC service provider, you have actual Bitcoin that's subdivided into Bitcoin that I own. Now, there are technical situations where I may not be able to actually turn that small amount of Bitcoin into useful Bitcoin that I can respend. But because it's being subdivided, assuming ARC actually works properly and people don't find a flaw in it, you can't steal that money. It'll just disappear, and we'll both be unhappy, which is a very good outcome compared to the outcome of he runs away with the money and he's happy and I'm not. That's like a very concrete kind of technical thing. Blockstream Liquid, if I have Bitcoin on Blockstream Liquid, it's clearly an IOU. And if I have Bitcoin on a merge mine chain, at least with current technology, it's still going to look like an IOU because it's not really directly convertible to Bitcoin. Now, maybe this changes with future kinds of technology.
But with Liquid, you have the same situation. You need the pegnatories to sign the release of the funds. Same situation, Liquid and
to be clear, I think that's what I was saying. Like, it's an IOU.
Yeah.
Right? And I would say a merge mine version of Liquid is going to look like an IOU with current technology. Because it's just not Bitcoin. It's not a Bitcoin transaction. If it's backed by Bitcoin, well, it's backed by something else, and you have to have some kind of mechanism.
But I think we have agreement that these are different security assumptions. But that's not the question. It's like you can say if I go to Lightning, for example, there is availability assumptions. It's like I need to be online. In order to avoid, there are systems to delegate that into other people that will check.
Watchtowers.
Yeah, if there's somebody tries to steal or to present like, I know you owe you, because Lightning use IOUs in a way as well. So, what I'm saying is like all systems have security assumptions.
Keep in mind, I was very clear earlier. I'm not saying that Lightning is fundamentally like better or worse than other things. I'm saying it's fundamentally different.
Yeah.
And you know, at least you should know, when you download an app on an app store and it says an L2, you should have a rough idea of what kind of security model it's going to have. You know, people who understand the tech behind Lightning are going to say, oh yeah, I probably should turn on this wallet once in a while, or maybe my money might disappear. It's not very likely because of the various protections that are involved, but you know, it's a thing that could happen. And you know that if I have money on an L1, well, the money can just go sit there indefinitely, you know, within a certain amount of reason. Like, those are two different kind of models.
Absolutely.
And I think they're reasonably clear to users. What I don't like is how you get this enormous flood of things calling themselves L2s when they don't work anything at all like Lightning to the extent they even work at all. You know, you have a lot of L2s where in reality there's like some trusted entity and they're the ones who actually hold the keys. You know, the truth is, from a tech point of view, no one's invented and implemented L2s other than Lightning in just barely Arc. Like, that really is it. This will come further, but at the moment, there's nothing that I would say to a consumer should be called an L2 other than Lightning, because none of it exists yet.
I'm saying all this, not to make a fight between us, but just to put on the table what for me is very important, that is definitions. Because then we start making tricks to ourselves about what are things. And I believe that sidechain is a very nice definition, because normally when you hear a sidechain, you understand that you're going to be using Bitcoin as unit of account. They're not going to be a shitcoin flying around. That's why nobody talks about stacks as a sidechain. They call themselves many things, but it's not in the game because we know that it's not that. But it's important to have these definitions so that when we have a clear knowledge about what is a sidechain, what Peter says, what is an L2, we can clearly identify what is not an L2 and what is just people trying to sell shitcoins in another flavor, and they cannot sell them as ICOs because that doesn't sell anymore. They cannot sell it as DeFi, doesn't sell anymore. Meme coins, maybe it still sells, but Bitcoin L2 has some marketing. You can see that with Cardano clearly.
Yeah.
So that's why I put all these definitions game on the table, because I believe it's the only tool people can have to not get scammed.
I agree, we need to work on definitions. That's definitely like that, and some definitions, you know, what Peter is saying is like L2s were defined by Lightning, so therefore anything that looks like Lightning is an L2. That's okay, that's one way of doing it, but we have a reality of the market, say, like using L2 in a different way. So at the same time, if there's no consensus, that we don't get to a point where we have a taxonomy that everybody uses, we are in the same place. It's like, even though the three of us can accept, I mean, I can be happy with Peter's definition of an L2. We can be happy with the definition of a sidechain. Still, from a market perspective, you know, it's not enough to sort out the problem you were trying to tackle. That is like how we avoid people from falling into scams. And I think at the end, it goes to intellectual honesty. What I was saying before is like, you know, are you really expressing how your model works? Are you, and maybe a good definition helps in that sense, are you really posing yourself as somebody contributing to the Bitcoin economy, contributing to the Bitcoin network, and not doing that, which at the end is the first red flag for a scam. It's like, if you say that you're doing something that you're not doing, then you are a scammer.
I believe that can introduce subjectivity. No, I believe this is good for Bitcoin. No, I believe it's not good for Bitcoin. No,
it needs to be actual economic contribution. It cannot be, I believe. It's like Rootstock transactions are paying Bitcoin miners in Bitcoin IOUs to follow Peter's definition. It's like, but actually those Bitcoin miners, through a mechanism that is very well defined, can be turned into actual Bitcoins. So that is like, you're being rewarded for every transaction, every operation on the network is contributing to the Bitcoin miners' sustainability in Bitcoin. So that's not something, it's not a wishful thinking, it's a reality, economic reality.
I think there's a lot of disagreement on whether or not Rootstock does that, but I would say, you know, ignoring that point.
No, but that's a reality. I mean, Bitcoin miners are getting paid in RBTC.
It is not clear that's good or bad. I mean, I'll say that, but I'd say from a different perspective though, if you're a user and you're downloading a wallet off an app store, how much do you really care that's like contributing to Bitcoin miners? I mean, what you care is, are you going to lose your money? You know, is this wallet going to let you transact your money in the future, or is it all going to disappear? Similarly, if you were to use, you know, my own open timestamps protocol, do you really care whether or not Bitcoin miners got anything in return? What you care is that your timestamps are valid and can't be faked. And I'm not going to go and tell you that open timestamps is good or bad for Bitcoin miners. In fact, I'll openly tell you there are certainly scenarios, kind of exotic ones, but there probably are weird game theory scenarios where it's actually bad for Bitcoin to have open timestamps. But what I can tell you is open timestamps is every bit as secure as the Bitcoin chain is because it anchors to Bitcoin. And notice I use the term anchor. You know, I picked that term because it gives the right sense of meaning to people. Like, people have this idea of what an anchor is, and they don't interpret it more than that. You know, when you hear the word anchor, you don't think like L2 like Lightning, you don't think L1 like Bitcoin. You think, well, yeah, it's kind of somehow attached to Bitcoin, and as long as Bitcoin doesn't break, well, it's not going to break either. You know, it's a good marketing term because it's very honest about what it really is. And, you know, a bunch of L2s have different security properties. Well, they can come up with a different name. You know, I think the Cashew and Fediment people have done a good job of that for the most part. For the most part, I don't see them calling themselves L2s. You know, they use terms that suggest what they are and do a decent job of it.
No, I think that's okay, but what happens when Rootstock have BitVM, for example, and I can feed the proof, you know, into Bitcoin and release my Bitcoins without any other assumption, then it will become an L2. I mean,
the emphasis on then it would become. You know, if you change the technology,
absolutely.
then absolutely
yeah,
things
absolutely.
can go change.
I mean, but again, I think we are saying going in circles because we are all in agreement that we need better definitions. We have, for me, it's interesting that the market...
I don't think we're in agreement on the need for better definitions. I think we have very good definitions in the technical community, and there are definitions that marketing should use too, because they're honest definitions.
The market is using different definitions than yours.
Well,
so at the end, is like, I think the market needs better definitions to achieve what you are saying, which I agree. Again, is like from a user perspective, which trust assumptions I'm getting into, and the definitions will help me navigate that and saying, okay, I'm interacting with a system with these trust assumptions. Now I'm interacting with a system with these trust assumptions. Therefore, I choose my risk because I understand my risk because these definitions help me in that regard. And I think we need better definitions because that is not happening today with Bitcoin L2s at all for an end user. It's like for an end user today, they are interacting with stacks the same as with Rootstock, the same as with Lightning, and you know they don't know, and they are totally different trust assumptions. I'm not saying which one is better or worse. I'm saying now we are like encompassing like a lot of different trust assumptions under one term that is Bitcoin L2. And you are proposing one definition for Bitcoin L2s, but this is not commonly agreed on the market today. So, I mean, I might agree with you, I might not.
I see this more as the problem of just so much of the marketing is just scammy. You know, it's like it's not a question of, we have to kind of get together and come up with careful terms. It's so much as just, look, guys, you just can't call it that. You might want to because you wish you could, but you can't because your tech doesn't do that. And I think that from the Bitcoin point of view, a lot of times we just should hold the line and say, look, your thing is just not that, and you should stop calling it that. Much the same way as, when Blockstream on occasion makes a mistake of calling Liquid an L2, I'm quite happy to call them out on that. And I think most people at Blockstream would not go call Liquid an L2. I think the problem there is mostly their marketing department, who frankly often aren't, don't understand the tech very well too. But that's something to push back on, not come to a different agreement on. It's just saying, look, you guys just are not honestly marketing your tech.
I believe we got into a definition blockade here. So we have some minutes left. I think it will be nice to open for questions. Maybe people wondering if what they bought last week is an L2 or not. But yeah, do we have another mic to go around? If not, ¿tenemos un micro para ir? ¿No tenemos este? Vale, yo hago ejercicio. Ah. Vale, okay, so we have one question there, I think, yeah.
Thank you. I want to ask Peter if he's if he is Satoshi. I want to ask Peter if he is Satoshi, like HBO says.
Yeah, of course I'm Satoshi.
Yeah.
So are you, so is him. I mean, after all, if I denied it, wouldn't that be what Satoshi would say?
Yes.
What,
And
what
why-
would
why
Satoshi
HBO?
think about L2s?
Well, you know, I think Satoshi would go and look at L2s and think, shit, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
And why HBO says it?
Are we still in the Satoshi thing? Would be
Yes.
great to have L2 questions. Like the last question was why HBO says you are, because he has to sell. They have to sell a documentary probably. Another marketing problem. Yeah. Okay, so Dulce, and then we go to the back because they were.
Bueno, pregunto en español y traduces. ¿Por qué ARC sí sería una L2?
Pero esto es para inglés, tiene que ser.
Pero para que toda la gente lo entienda.
Okay.
¿Por qué ARC sí sería una L2 si además también tiene un single point of failure más grande que Lightning?
Okay.
Oh, wait, yeah. So I understand the question. The question was, why is ARC an L2 if it has single point of failure? Well, so ARC does not have a single point of failure. You know, after all, if we have a Lightning channel. From my point of view, there's a single point of failure in that your Lightning code could go down. But system-wide, that's not a single point of failure. Now, if you're an ARC ASP, you know, you might have, say, 10,000 users. But system-wide, you know, there's 10 million users across a whole bunch of different ASPs. The other thing about single points of failure is from the perspective of losing money, even if hypothetically there was only one ASP, to the extent the ARC protocol works, and that's a complex discussion, but you know, let's assume for sake of argument it does in fact prove to work as we hope it does, then from the point of view of losing money or a scam, we still succeeded. You know, yes, a single point of failure means you can't transact, but another ASP can be spun up later and, you know, we can recover from this. So is that the same security model as L1? No, but it seems to be an acceptable one.
So, but let's say that if it doesn't work, if it fails this single point of failure, you still have your funds.
Exactly. Or at least if my funds aren't big enough to represent on chain, the ARC service provider didn't gain from it. You know, they just lost a lot of money too, and no one's happy. And as long as no one's happy, there's a strong disincentive to it happening. Now, you know, there's technical nuances here, but like, that's roughly speaking, you know,
Diego is really wanted to talk.
Sorry, Peter, but what you said is exactly the same model with Rootstock. It's like, I mean, because of course the people running the peg would be very unhappy, you know, losing the funds. I don't think anything that trusts third parties cannot be called an L2 by your definition. I'm not saying my definition. Like, so I think in that case, ARC shouldn't be an L2. Sorry for that, because if you're trusting people not being happy losing money, then it's not an L2. But I'm using your definition, not mine.
So I have to go point out, Lightning does make use of this, because on Lightning, I can pay you 1 Satoshi. Now, while that payment's in flight, there is no way to represent that on chain. You know, and this is why the L2 definition has this economic part of it, because there are economic transactions which cannot be represented on chain, and you have to use a secondary trust assumption. And that's why, you know, in my paper, for instance, I say very clearly, well, obviously the preferred one is you can withdraw, but if the amount is so low you just can't represent on chain, you're just going to have a secondary model. There is no other way. I mean, as long as you can't economically put 1 Satoshi in a Bitcoin UTXO, you're just going to have to make this kind of trade-off.
Okay, we had 2 more questions, yeah, there, and let's see if we can get there, yeah. But this panel is getting more and more interesting.
Hey guys.
Yeah, it's good, good. Now, no.
No, you can't hear me.
Now, try again. Check, check.
Oh.
Sí, sí, yes,
there
yes.
you go. Okay. Hey guys. So I just wanted to ask, so Jullian, you made a great point. You said that many of the layer 2s are just marketing and there's a lot of just shit out there, right? So if I'm a developer and if I'm looking to build a DeFi project that's very secure and that has a similar kind of security as Bitcoin, where would you recommend that I go?
I hate to say this, but I think the answer is there is no such thing as saying I'm just a DeFi developer, I want to make a secure project. You know, the way all these things have to work if they're legit projects is you come up with a good protocol that actually does something interesting, and then you go work through that protocol to figure out how to implement it. Now, a very simple example of that was my Open Timestamps project. Open Timestamps is very simple. It's like, you know, if you're a smart person and understand crypto, you can figure it out in a couple weekends. It's not a clever protocol, but it works. And the design process of saying, I have this goal, I make this protocol, I do this, this, and this. It is not, I've applied DeFi magic to it, and now my protocol is secure. You know, you just have to, understand the nuance of this, and it's like, sort of like the question is ill-formed. I mean, my real advice to you would be...
Well, what if I have a really good protocol? Say I've already built my protocol and it's great and I think that it's the next thing in DeFi. I'm not saying myself, just if I were generally that person, where would you recommend that I go?
Well, I mean, if you already have that great protocol, you go give some talks on it, see if it's actually good. I mean, like Arc was developed this way. People came up with a protocol, people published about it saying, hey, we think we can make this new Lightning-like thing. People looked at it and said, yeah, actually, that's a good idea. And like it just snowballed from there. But that's going to depend on what protocol you're doing.
I believe that the key word of your question was Bitcoin. So if it's DeFi and Bitcoin,
I would say it depends on the. Sorry, I will look like a broken record, no? But it depends on the programming language you will use. All different programming. I mean, the scripting language of Bitcoin is a push-down automata, so it doesn't have recursivity, it doesn't have forking, logical forking. So it's very limited to what you can do. No, that's why BitVMX is a breakthrough in that sense. It's like being able to have more complex logic, validated in Bitcoin. But if you choose like a general purpose Turing complete language for that, then very soon you will have a surface of attack in that program that you cannot actually, unless you use formal validation and certain things, that you cannot for sure know that there's no vectors of attack in your program. So how security in that environment is done is basically you run the protocol, you put money at stake, and of course there are a lot of best practices and things you will do first. And over time, the more money you have, the more time that thing has been running without being attacked, you feel it's like hardened, no? It's like you can trust that piece of, that's how we do it in the open, like you go increasingly putting more money and that. The underlying infrastructure you use to secure that general purpose, if you want to go general purpose, EVM today is like the Ethereum virtual machine is the more commonly used. Of course, if you want to do that, Rootstock is the safest environment to do that. But then one thing is the safetiness of the blockchain you are putting your contracts. Another thing is the safetiness of the program itself. And that in a general purpose environment, the only thing you can do is what I said, is harden the software by exposing it with enough money at stake. And at a certain point you will say, okay, if it has $100 million at stake, has been running for 5 years, it's not for the lack of hackers, and the code is open, so everybody can check it, find holes in it, okay, you can say it's pretty safe. But again, there's nothing fully safe, it's like in that context.
We are out of time. We had one more question, but we're out of time. They don't allow me to continue. But thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you.